Reborn, the story of Sister Mardiyyah Taylor, who has so far told us about how her research into Islam was started through the behaviour of a not so practicing Muslim, let's say that. And I believe it was this particular individual who gave you your first Quran.
Yeah, he just turned up with it one day and said, I thought you'd like to read this. And he jokingly said, and it was a joke, you never know, you might even become a Muslim one day. But he didn't like it when I did and called me a zealot.
Really? What, jokingly or?
No, I think he was deadly serious, because you've turned into a religious zealot.
Wow.
So
he doesn't know the amount of reward he's going to get just by giving you that Quran. So
exactly.
May Allah forgive him and forgive us all.
So, inshallah.
Inshallah. But what was your impression of the Quran when you first read it?
I think I read it virtually from cover to cover. I didn't put it down. I think that was the first time my husband actually jokingly asked me, when are you going to change your religion? And this was some time before I actually did.
So he was obviously aware of the fact that you were...
Oh yeah, he knew I read it. And I also, because at the same time, which I've just remembered, I bought a book called Teach Yourself Islam, which I think was meant for schools. And I kept them both on my nightstand, and I would read, and he did jokingly say, oh, when are you going to change your religion? So yeah, it had a big impact. I read it from cover to cover the first time. I did then put it down, and I read several other books then after that. Again, I started reading. But it had most things were familiar, not everything. Most things were familiar from Bible stories.
Sure.
I was a bit shocked by the story of Maryam, because I hadn't realised that the Islamic story was so different from the Christianity, story.
Sure.
So that was a bit of a shock, but it sort of made sense when I'd had time to read, think about it. Obviously it's they are very different, and having been brought up as a Christian, you accept the story of what things happened at Christmas and how it happened. But it actually, it made a lot more sense for her just to have a child on her own, and rather than go through the rigmarole of getting married. And I never quite understood this part of Joseph playing in it. And
sure. So it was a bit of a shock.
It was a bit of a shock, but it's accepted. And I never, although I'd always loved religious education at school and at Sunday school, I'd never known that Jonas was a prophet. Somewhere that had been taught to me. I thought it was a fairy story. So that was another shock, but that that was another story I enjoyed reading about in the Quran. I remember.
Alhamdulillah. Tell us a little bit about this period where you are now researching Islam. You've got your own copy of the Holy Quran, and of course you're reading other books as well. But tell us about this in relation to your life at that particular time. I'm talking around about 1999 to 2001.
Well, as I say, it did become a very big part of my life, reading so much so that my husband did notice. And my husband is a lovely man, but he is very private, and he knew what I was. He didn't interfere in what I was reading or ask a lot of questions about it any other time. So for him to have noticed, this was obviously, he realised that this was important to me. So it was a big thing, and it was having an effect on my life. I was changing the way I behaved, the way I dressed, my social habits. I was working in London I had two jobs in London. One, but they were both very social. Certainly after work, going to the pub, having a drink with friends, eating out, all these sorts of things. And I guess I wasn't the perfect wife. I was busy. I got home very late. So every now and again I would pull back and say, okay, fine, that's enough. Stop trying to do this. and I'd pull back to another, and I'd start dressing differently, and people would, I don't know whether I was doing it consciously, I think I was doing it unconsciously.
Sure.
Then I decided at one point that it had got really silly, that I was dressing far too conservatively, that I had stopped drinking as much, and I wasn't going out. And I thought, okay, fine, I'm going to get another job. I'm going to change jobs, and I'm really going to prove to myself once and for all I'm not a Muslim. I got a job with a well-known theatre producer, and champagne parties, first nights. And but even there, I remember going to My Fair Lady, first night in London, and wearing an outfit very similar to a Sherlock Camus and a dupatta. It wasn't, it was from a fashion house, but it was that style. And I remember at some point in the evening having the scarf on my head. There was all these actresses and actors, you know, big hotel in London, very dressed up, shall we say, and me very covered. And I'm thinking, okay, fine. You know, this didn't work. I haven't proved to myself I'm not a Muslim. So that is when I contacted 2 mosques. I wrote to them because I couldn't get telephone numbers, and I really didn't know where to go. I wrote to 2 mosques locally to me, neither of whom replied.
Really?
I found out that they were very much men only, very cultural, very Pakistani, one Bangladeshi. So they had no thing, and I then sat having lunch one day, and my daughter phoned and said, there's a plane gone into the Twin Towers.
Whoops.
And my first thought was, oh God, my family aren't going to take me being a Muslim after. No, well, not my first thought, because my first thought when I got back to the office and they were saying, there's another one gone in, this is terrorists, you know.
I remember the day very well.
And I remember thinking, the Muslims are going to get the blame, and my family aren't going to like this if I become a Muslim. That was my first reaction.
You didn't think to yourself, especially because there was this battle going on, although obviously it seemed like the inclination towards Islam was winning, but didn't you think to yourself, well, this is a golden opportunity for me to actually put this Islam quest to bed forever now? No,
I do definitely remember thinking, my family aren't, I'm going to have to postpone this. This isn't a good time to do this.
So you'd already made your decision?
I think I had at that point made the decision that I'd certainly, as I said, contacted these mosques. They hadn't replied, and I was thinking about the next step and what I was going to do next. And getting back to the office over the next few days and weeks, I was forever defending Muslims and Muslim countries over various things that people were saying. It wasn't a nice time. I don't know, you know, whether you were in London at that time, but people were scared, and they were saying things. And I remember saying, you know, okay, fine, are we going to get rid of every Irish person? You know, we've lived with the IRA. We didn't throw, you know. So I was forever defending Muslims, and I was thinking, okay. And it got up to Christmas, and I can't remember if it was before Christmas or during Christmas, I decided that I would look for a job closer to home, so that I could, I really didn't like working in London after that. I'd had perhaps I'm a bit scared, I don't know, but I think that came into it, and I decided to get out, but I also decided that it would be a part-time job.
It's probably to do with the social.
Yeah, it was everything. I just wanted to get away from the environment and thing. But I went back to work in the January and was told my contract wasn't being renewed anyway.
This is in London.
Yeah, so I was out of a job anyway. So I felt that was a good sign. It'd been taken out of my hands, and I did then get a job locally, part-time, and managed to, you know, do more reading and research. And then I wrote to 2 websites.
You wrote to 2 websites. Yes, one you said was a Salafi website.
Yeah, I didn't know when I contacted them. I found them on these 2 websites, and I thought, okay, fine, well, I'll write to them both. I just explained that I was looking for more information with a view to converting to Islam, and I wanted someone to help me, teach me how to pray. You know, if there were some sisters there that could help, and they both replied. One was a lot closer to home than the other, so I although I stayed in touch with the other one, I went to the other one, and it turned out to be an Islamic centre in Luton. And it was a Salafi centre. And they were very nice. They taught me to pray, but I quickly realised that everything that was bit of this and bit of that, and it was shirk to do this and shirk to do that, and I was like, oh gosh, it didn't feel comfortable. But by that point I wanted to be a Muslim. I knew what I believed in, and I figured, okay, fine, I don't need to get into the politics of Islam. I think that was my thought. I can be a Muslim. I don't have to be Sunni. I don't have to be Shia.
You were aware of them?
Yeah, I was aware of the differences. Shias were the bad guys, I'm afraid. That was my understanding of Shias.
Is that from your own research?
No. This was from my background. That the Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iran-Iraq, not the Iran-Iraq war, but the Iranian embassy crisis and all these sorts of things. I just remember that it didn't have a particularly good press, Shias.
Sure. So basically, the way in which Islam and Imam Khomeini was portrayed over the news, they
put me off. And certainly my understanding of it and my thing. And I think if I had have known, I think I would have gone. I wouldn't have known what Salafis were. I would have known what Shias were. So I think if I'd have known these two websites, what they were before I contacted them, I would have gone with the Salafi one anyway.
Okay. So the second one was a Shia
It turned out to be a Shia website.
Right.
Yeah. So, that was, I can't remember then.
Yeah, so you were talking about how after a little while you were starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable with some of the way in which Islam was being portrayed to you.
They wouldn't answer any of my questions. I had questions about Imam Ali. I had questions. Oh yeah, this was one of the ones, because I went Imam Ali and everything was Aisha. And I would ask questions about Lady Fatima, and they didn't want to know. And I then was shown a website one day by a very young, educated woman with a young child. Wanted to show me this website, and I didn't really want to look at it. And I said, okay, what about this one? And I went on to Answer, and she said, I have enough trouble understanding what I'm told to believe without looking at anything else. And at that point I was like, okay, fine, I don't think you're the right person for me to be teaching me. If you're that close-minded, I didn't want to know.
Sure.
So I then...
And was this one of your mentors?
Yeah. And at the same time, I was having problems with her and one of her friends, several of the sisters, all much the same age, in their early 30s, considerably, all young enough to be my daughter anyway, telling me that I couldn't stay with my husband. That I'd done my Shahada 3 months by that, and he hasn't converted, so you must leave him. You can't do this, you can't do that. I don't take this. I don't buy this, that Allah has led me to this path. He's led me to Islam, and He's going to wreck a 30-year marriage. And that's what He wants. This does not make sense. So that's when I then recontacted the second website. Talked to them again. They were very clever. Every question I answered, I would go times, and I spent hours with the husband and wife who ran it, and go over the same thing over and over again. They would always answer my questions. Very often, even, I can't remember the questions now, what they were, but very often they would use Bukhari and Muslim books to answer my question.
Sure.
And I remember one day I said, why weren't they in thing? He said, well, because they're Salafis, and your beliefs, what you believe about Imam Ali, that he should have followed the Prophet, and the sermon, the last prophet, the last sermon of the Prophet, and all this. He said, your Shia beliefs. He said, that's why. And I was like, I can't be a Shia.
Because you still had that.
But in my background, and they still tease me about the look on my face about, oh God, the Shias, they're the troublemakers. But
so
here I am.
So you
After that, I just spent time with them and they then went on to solve my marriage problem.
Alhamdulillah, yeah. I remember you mentioning how you Went and got the fatwa. What did they encourage you to go to a majlis? Had you been to a majlis at this particular moment in time? I guess not.
I can't remember quite how Muharram fell at that time, but they did sort of encourage me to go. I think I only went about once the first year that I was able to get there, you know, as it came. And I remember them saying, oh, just, you know, don't... they explained what there would be, that there would be a lecture and thing, and that Martin... And I knew what Martin was. I'd seen it on the television. I had seen... and I had visions of the chains and this sort of thing. That's what I'd seen on the television. And they said, oh, you know, just watch and thing. So when it came to just a very gentle
tapping,
I was like, okay, fine, you know, I can understand. I can handle this. Yeah, that's fine, exactly. So, yeah, I went and I've been going ever since. So, that's good.
And how did you find it? I mean...
Yeah, I mean,
You were aware of the story prior to going?
Yes, they had... I'm not saying I knew the whole story. I knew what it was about, the lead up. I didn't know exactly each day, and obviously, and thing. But it was... I do remember... That's right, I've just remembered something. Just before I went, they gave me a tape. It's the story of Karbala. It's for a child. I think it's for children on the tape. And I played it in my car, and because I remember ringing. I remember having to stop my car because I had tears running down my face, and I'm ringing them up and saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe this story." You know, I've just had to stop my car because I can't see. I'm driving. So I was very moved by that. So I'm pretty sure that was before my first majlis.
So you're kind of in tune
with what it was all about, and
your first majlis.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you don't mind me bringing this up, it's just obviously something that you shared with me beforehand, and I think it's very important to share with your permission, of course. And this was about how, I think 1 year when you were actually now going on a regular basis to Muharram, you had a very tragic event happen in your family.
2005, my youngest son was killed, and it was the 7th of Muharram he was actually killed. I'd come home from work very tired, decided that I couldn't go because I used to travel to Stanmore, which was about 40 minutes drive from home, and I felt I was too tired to go that night. And by sort of 9:30 time, my son wasn't home from work, which was thing, and we were getting hundreds of phone calls because he was very popular, and his friends were ringing and saying, you know, why isn't he home? Where is he? And I was planning his funeral. I don't know why I was thinking, you know, I'm going to have a reading I want a reading from the Quran. I'm going to have to try and persuade my husband. And I remember thinking, how am I going to do it? And I was giving...
just because he wasn't home at
he just wasn't home on time. His girlfriend rang us and said, you know, why isn't he home? Do you know where he is? Was he going to do anything? Yeah, and as I say, I was planning his funeral. I was giving his belongings away. In my mind, I was giving him, you know, so-and-so can have that will remember him by that, and so his brother can have this. His nephew can have, you know, my grandson could have this. And then at 11:30, you know, there was a knock at the door, and I think by then my husband and I both knew that something had happened. And I just remember my husband coming in saying, you're going to have to be brave, Rowan's been killed. And he was very, very blunt about it. He came out and said it. But I didn't dissolve into tears or thing. I just sort of, I can't explain how I felt. I felt quite strong at that time. It felt, you know, we had things to do, to organise, and I don't understand. I kept thinking about Karbala, you know, and the tragedy of Imam Hussein, and how many people had been killed during that, and how lucky I was to have had my son, and how some people in other countries, you know, they have such disasters, they lose 5-6 members of their family perhaps, you know, at one time. I'd just lost my son. And I remember, I did feel quite strong. I couldn't, well, I don't understand to this day how my husband and children and my parents, my family, got through it without a very strong belief, because...
well, they say that from what you told me, it sounded like they felt you were the pillar, you were the one.
Yeah, I think, people have commented that I appeared to be very strong over it, and I remember a conversation I had with my cousin who was in tears. I think it was it was soon after Rowan's funeral, actually, and I said, well, it was his time. I said, we all have a time. We're not here we don't go when we feel like it. We have a time allotted to us. I said, and this was Rowan's time. I said, Allah knows why he went. Maybe there's something awful. If he'd have been around longer, something horrible would have happened. Maybe he'd have got on drugs, or you don't know. And I said, but this was his time, and this is what's meant to be. This is how it is. And Rowan is still part of our family. We talk about him most days. We visit his grave. We talk to him. I moan about him, the grass growing around him, and my grandchildren talk about him. And it will always be like that. But he had his time, and we had him for 23 years, and that's it.
Alhamdulillah. So it sounds as though the fact that it actually happened in Muharram actually
I think it helped, definitely. Yeah. No, I every year in Muharram is hard, and it's doubly hard because I can't help. Sometimes it actually worries me whether I'm crying for Imam Hussein or whether I'm crying for Rowan. But they're so mixed up.
Of course.
But I actually don't think it matters.
Of course.
Because it was Imam Hussein who helped me get through it, and it was so. That's to me.
Sure. And the fact that you were observing Muharram on that tragic day, I think that's testimony enough. We've only got a few minutes left. I just wanted to ask, just to maybe conclude, what about your family? I mean, normally when I'm speaking to people who've reverted to Islam, they're relatively young, and sometimes, their parents, especially if they're female, give them a bit of a hard time. But of course you were, established, if you like. How was it with your family? And I know your parents are still alive as well. I mean, how did they take to you becoming a Muslim?
Well, obviously my husband was the first to know, and after he'd made the initial sort of, when you're going to change your religion, he did actually ask me again, some weeks, I can't remember, months later, and I said, I'm going to, very shortly. And he was a bit shocked to begin with, and he found hijab, my wearing, because I'd taken so long. I think this was the problem with my family, that I'd taken so many years to come to Islam. Hijab was important. I knew that was something that I wanted. So my family have all found that quite hard. They're more accepting of it now. I am the... People say, you families are okay so long as they don't joke about you. But I think so long as they're joking about me, they make jokes about me... To me, about wearing hijab. So long as they're not making snide remarks or jokes about Islam, I can cope, and that's fine. They can joke about me and make fun of me and do all they like. I just won't cook Sunday dinner for them, but it's that's fine. So on the whole, my mum said, her typical English mother, you weren't brought up to be like that, which I never quite understood what that was. But one of my sisters didn't mind at all because she's not religious. The other one was worried, as I said, about Christmas. What am I going to do at Christmas? And I said, well, it's a family occasion. I'll celebrate it. I haven't come to Islam overnight. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. So I will carry on the way I am doing and have done for the last few years. It's a family occasion. We'll celebrate it together. You have your belief. If you want to remember that, that's fine. I'm grateful for my family that I have, that are loving, that love me, that respect me, and I love Prophet Jesus. He's a prophet, and I can think about that at the same time. I do.
Sure.
So that's how it goes on. And
would you say? I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. Would you say that the impression that your family members, be it your parents, your husband, your children, grandchildren, their understanding of Islam has improved through interacting with you or seeing you interact with Islam?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I've been told, oh, you should tell them this, you should tell them that, you must. I don't. I don't lecture my family. I don't think. If they ask a question, I will answer it and we will have a discussion. If they don't, that's fine, we'll let them get on with it. I hope it's something in my behaviour, something that I do that may make them think, well, you know, why does she do that? She's a Muslim, maybe that's, and maybe it would just flick on a light and they'll decide to do it for themselves. I don't know, but I'm not gonna force it into them. They're adults. My children were adults before I converted.
Sure. So, and I've noticed that as well, that sometimes when once you tell people that you've become a Muslim, then they gauge how successful you've been by how many other family members have become Muslim.
No, unfortunately, I've had people say to me, you know, oh well, if you haven't converted them within so long, you're not going to, and you should ditch. You know, particularly amongst Salafis, they're very strict about, you know, how they. I think, you know, why don't you just take your time with your family, accept them, respect them? They have a right to their own opinion.
Sure.
And so long as my family accept and respect that I have a right to my opinion, that's fine.
Sure. And of course you're doing da'wah anyway, and of course even if they don't revert to Islam, as long as their opinion of Islam
is positive,
is enhanced,
that's fine.
Alhamdulillah, you're doing a good job.
And you know, certainly with my husband, I know his beliefs are very similar to mine, and you know, he's very respectful of it, and they all are, so that's
Alhamdulillah.
how it is.
Thank you very, very much, Sister Mardiyyah. It's been a pleasure, and I've been looking forward to this interview for a long time, and thank you very much for taking the time out. I know you've come from very far away.